My favorite thing about an in-studio is in the instance when I know nothing about the band. And then I come in with a very open mind, and they blow me away.
My current has been doing in-studios right from the beginning. In fact, did a lot of them right at the beginning. The current really benefited tremendously from being a part of Minnesota Public Radio, because we have this beautiful studio, the Maud Moon Weyerhaeuser studio, and just about every band that ever comes into this room just goes, whoa, because it's such a beautiful space, and they're not accustomed to seeing that at a radio station. I think that live performance is a completely different art form from record making. A band or an artist can spend months making a record and refining it and perfecting it, but whether that band can perform it live is a whole different thing. And so I think that for the current, for radio stations, it's one thing to play music that has been pre-recorded and produced, but it's a whole other thing to present live performances. We're in a unique position to make very good recordings in our studios here and put them out for our audience. It's a special thing that we do for our audiences, I think.
When bands come in, it's my job to figure out what songs they're going to perform, the order it's going to be performed, and then just talking to them about if there's anything in particular that they want to discuss. But my role is pretty much any in-studio performances that come through the current studios. Usually I'm going to be producing it or editing it, getting it ready for air.
Think we better listen to these kids.
I'll begin usually an hour and a half or 2 hours before their arrival, setting up the studio. I'll figure out from what the information they've given me, how I want to set it up. I try to have everything set up as much as possible before they arrive. So I'll set up all the microphones, the instruments. We have a drum kit, several guitar amps, bass amp, piano, and some other miscellaneous pieces of backline gear that the band can use. A lot of times, especially touring bands, it's easier for them and faster to use our equipment than to drag their gear out of the van. We try to make it easy for them.
So I get to hang out in the studio and film and photograph most of the bands that come through the current studios. I try to share the sense of being in the room with that artist. So I'll typically do photos during the sound check. So while the band is practicing a song for Michael DeMarc to hear what it's going to sound like, I'll be moving around the room taking photos during that time and trying to get some of the action shots and some candid shots. And then once the band actually starts the taping, I'm just doing the video at that point. These are still a radio session while we film every single one. Really, the first and foremost is a radio session, so it's really primarily about getting a really good audio take and having the bands be comfortable to have a really great performance in this great studio.
We can say whatever we mean.
So when I walk in to do an interview, and I first walk into the studio, usually it's just the band and they're set up, and it's usually kind of in a semicircle. It feels like a Queen's performance, because I'm sitting in a chair and then they're like right in front of me playing, and it's a nice room that it just sort of lends itself, I think, to people performing well. I mean, there's certainly been some that have dropped the ball, but especially when people see this piano that we have here and they fancy themselves at all a keyboardist, they kind of drop dead when they see the Steinway.
It's a wonderful piano, and often musicians come in and say, this is the best piano I've ever played. So we're very lucky to have that, which of course is due to the fact that we record a lot of classical music in here.
In-studio sessions sound absolutely amazing in Studio M. It doesn't hurt that we have great engineers as well, but And any band that comes through town, when they come into our studio, it's just like, oh, wow. And of course, once they've been here, they'll never forget this place. So when they come back, it's like, oh yeah, I remember this place, the studio.
Well, while a band is playing, I'm trying to actually get the mix live too. I can go back and remix it later and record multi-track, so I can remix it, and sometimes I do touch things up, but I really go for the live mix also while I'm seeing them and, kind of going on that same energy that they are while they're playing it live. Sometimes a band will say, can we fix that? Can we overdub a part or punch it in? And we don't allow that. We really want live performances. I tell them, we're telling our audience it's a live performance. It needs to be a live performance. But when a band comes in and plays here, they're playing it live, and what you hear or see is exactly what happened in the studio.
And so we'll film with multiple cameras, sometimes it's as simple as one camera. Typically it's 2 to 5 cameras that I'm filming the session with. So when I'm editing the session, I'm actually bringing in all those camera angles and putting them together so that I can watch all those camera angles simultaneously, so I can watch it like it's live. And I'll edit in real time as the song plays back. I'll do a little bit of tweaking in terms of where the edits are after the fact, but really the bulk of the edit of those sessions comes from listening to the song in real time.
Musically, I like bands that aren't perfect. I don't respond that much to someone who is a perfectionist, and we've had some perfectionists in the studio, and I understand it, I guess, but I like flaws, I like mistakes, I like that feeling of sort of being on the verge of collapse. And I guess that's just always been, that's my little sweet spot. But there's something really charming to me about a band that's just like, bashing it out, or a band that's really unfamiliar with playing stripped down, because sometimes they'll come in without full instrumentation. And, they just give it a go and just like let it rip, and I love that.
Saving $23 a week.
Sometimes there's uncomfortable moments, and in addition, with those uncomfortable moments, you gotta let them fly. Sometimes that uncomfortable quietness after a question is good, and it builds up that anticipation of what's the answer gonna be. So if you start editing just to make things tighter for the air, it can take away the dynamic of the conversation between the host and the artist. So I try and leave as much as possible.
So being here at the studio, it's nice when you see bands come back in and recognize the room and recognize the team here. Because you can tell that just everyone's more comfortable. The band's more comfortable, our team's a little bit more comfortable. We're going to be able to get better content when everyone kind of knows each other. So it's really nice to be able to have that kind of relationship with some of the bands, whether it's a local band or a national band that just happens to come through the studios each time they come to town.
On the pressed metal ceiling's great.
I recall T-Bone Burnett came once, a great producer, and he just walked in and said, "It's so great that rooms like this exist." Just that, in the Midwest here, there's such a great room.